So we were privileged this morning to hear many of the narratives of Christ's life and birth, familiar stories that we read this time of year as we celebrate our Christmas season. As we gather on this Epiphany Sunday, we again celebrate and sing as light comes into the world and new hope comes to us. If you're like me, after you've heard stories over and over and over, and they become very familiar, and the songs become very familiar, sometimes they start to lose their impact. And so I think it is not without some insight when we say, hear what the Spirit of God is saying to God's people. And so that is my question this morning. As you've heard these verses read, and as we join together in the singing of hymns, what is it the Spirit of God is saying to each of you? I don't intend to speak long because we've already read lots of Scripture and sung lots of hymns. And I think the Scriptures in themselves are a sermon for each of us as we do embrace what the Spirit of God is saying to each of us. But I would like to focus a little bit on this gospel reading. Again, the very familiar story of the Magi coming to find the child and to worship and to bring gifts. There really is in that story, if you will, kind of a picture of our humanity. Both it's good and it's not so good. And we all fit sometimes into that continuum. Hopefully on our best days, we reflect the light of Christ. Sometimes in our more challenging days, we do not. But thank God there is grace that says we get to start again fresh each day. So I'm going to invite you to think with me a little bit around the idea of those who found Christmas and those who missed it. So let's think about Herod for a moment. What do we know of him? Well, what we know of Herod is that he was a ruler in that area of Jerusalem. He was nominally Jewish. He was an Edomite, but he was not a practicing Jew religiously. Clearly, he was a man of means and power, position. He had a history of great mistrust among the Jews, especially the Jewish leaders, and there was reason for that. He was known for his cruelty, actually. When he took position, power, he slaughtered the last remaining remnants of the Hasmonean dynasty, completely wiped them out. He executed more than half of the Sanhedrin. He killed 300 court officers. He executed his own wife, 2 of his sons, and his mother-in-law. At his deathbed, we are told by history that he arranged for all of the noblemen to be gathered and to be killed the moment his death was announced. So that's Herod. So when our scripture says he was frightened and all Jerusalem troubled, that's literal. They understood that when Herod got troubled or frightened, good things did not come. So we hear this story of how he says to these wise men, go find that child, I'd like to pay homage to. So you get, in some way, there is some suspicion around that. So that's Herod. Let's think about these wise men for a moment, or the Magi. We don't know a lot about them. History, tradition teaches us that they came from the east, perhaps Babylon. They were not culturally Jewish. Persian, probably. They did not know the prophecies, really, of Israel or the writings of Scripture of Israel. But they knew something significant must have occurred because they did study astrology, and they were somewhat aware of kind of how God may speak to us through creation. And so they traveled. also men of means and power and wealth. We know that because they probably traveled up to a year. It was not a quick trip for them. Jesus wasn't in the manger. They were in a home, and they traveled to pay him homage. And so what do we see of them? Because we don't know a lot of their history, we do know that they were seekers. They seem to have an interest in inquiring, to be open to new things. They were expectant, hoping to find something that would embrace their life in some way or give meaning to their life. And in some ways we see them coming as humble, giving, worshipful, joyful individuals. So that's the picture that Scripture gives of us today in our gospel lesson with Magi traveling to see Christ. And so what do you make of that? What I make of it is that, again, our humanity is very complex. We have the capability of falling towards that end of the continuum somewhat like Herod. I'm not suggesting anyone here is. But our humanity teaches us through our own history and experiences that we have the capability of doing some pretty wicked things. And then we see these individuals who are not necessarily religious in the way that we would understand them, but yet who seek and want in some way to embrace the good things, even though they too are men of power and wealth and privilege. And so in my own reflection, I think, where do I fall in that continuum? As I said, as I began, that I think in my best day, I would like to reflect the light of Christ that brings hope and encouragement to all people. But I also know that in my stress days, I can be difficult. I've not really thought about killing anyone, to be honest, but there are moments that I'd like them to go away, however that might be. And so my encouragement to you today as we kind of end this Christmas season, are you one that really found that joy, that light, that hope in this Christmas season? Or did the various struggles and challenges that our culture places on us maybe keep you from embracing that joy in the way you want to or would like to? And so, as we continue our worship today, I encourage you to see that light of Christ, that hope that refreshes us and renews us, and that we can each embrace that in some way as we move forward into all the challenges that life brings to us. Amen. Amen.